Hey, Jamey.
Hey, Jeff.
It's all on you, it's all on me. Can't you see? It's all on you, it's all on me. You and me, can't you? It's all on you, it's all on me.
Hey, Craig. Right or wrong, we don't care. Win or lose, we don't care. We don't care. We don't care. We don't care.
Jamey.
Jeff.
What's up, buddy?
Oh, another day in paradise.
Yeah, well, I do know. See, we go over this every week. Another day in paradise for you. You live in Pullman. And another day for me, which I don't know if this would qualify as paradise, Western Washington, as I got conferences this week. I got parent teacher conferences this week. So yeah. See, that was the face I was making off camera. I don't want to make that on camera because I'm supposed to be like, woohoo, yeah. Contact with parents,
I
partner on their kids' education. That's hence the get up I got going today where I'm not. So those people watch on YouTube know what I'm talking about. But if you're not watching on YouTube, let me describe. I'm wearing a red shirt that says Washington Education Association on it. I got a red Tacoma Rainiers hat, a little red for Ed today, a little teachers union thing, just kind of like, standing up, little solidarity for our union. So thinking about issues of education. So that's why I'm wearing all this today. It's kind of a week, man. It is kind of a week, but we have more exciting things to talk about than that. We got basketball. So joining me tonight again, standing in for Craig, who's still taking a little time off. I got my friend Jamey Vinnick here from Cougsfan.com. What's up, buddy?
I know,
yeah. So
get
yeah,
the branding
see, so
there.
For the YouTubers, we got Jamey's wearing his beautiful little Cougsfan.com quarter zip, right? As befitting befitting the Pullman bureau chief. I love that. That's like the best title, dude. I'm gonna give myself the Graham bureau chief of podcastversuseveryone.com.
I think that's a worthy appointment.
All right. Well, speaking of podcastversuseveryone.com, just to run through all the ways you can connect with us. Big one is podcastversuseveryone.com. Of course, our website. You can sign up for our newsletter there. I do a bit of writing. It's also, we send out the podcast that way. If you're listening on the podcast and you don't subscribe, please do that. That helps us out a ton. If you're listening on a podcast app, just click the little subscribe button. If you're watching us on YouTube, again, click that little subscribe button. Also, there's like a like button, do all that stuff. Again, it helps other people find us, helps us out a ton as we try to, grow our audience and have other people participate in what it is that we do. And then also one other quick reminder, we do have premium subscriptions. The biggest thing that gets you is access to our members only Slack. That's where the most hardcore of our fans and smartest of our fans hang out. Talk about the Cougs, talk about all kinds of stuff, up to and including like today's topic of discussion. David Riley getting an extension. We'll talk about that here in a sec. So that was a big hot topic of conversation. So if you want to join us, it's super fun. Annual memberships start at about $4, a little over $4 a month, or monthly memberships for $5 a month. And you can come join the fun. All right, let's talk hoops.
Let's do it.
All right, so we got men's basketball WCC tournament, women's basketball WCC tournament coming up. The men are in a bit worse of a position than the women are, but we will start with the men. So the men finished the season. So, all right, let's talk first, I guess, about like last weekend just a little bit. 2 games, they needed to go 2-0 to really be in a spot to jump into that 6th seed. Which they did. They also need a little bit of help from Loyola Marymount to go lose to St. Mary's, which they did kind of barely at home. But I would say they gave St. Mary's about the same kind of run at home that we gave St. Mary's at our place too. So, I mean, it's, road games are tough, but, St. Mary's prevailed, as you might expect from the team that is kind of in the class of the conference in the WCC. So that bumped us up to the 6th seed. It wasn't maybe the most triumphant weekend, but I will say I did finish feeling on a good note. So to quickly recap, Thursday was sort of the entire season in a nutshell. First half, right, against San Diego, they go up by 30 points, 30 damn points in the first half. It's senior night, comes out, Dane Erikstrip is, like unconscious, kind of making everything. They are absolutely steamrolling San Diego. They are up by 30 before the break. And at that point, for all intents and purposes, right, we all know, like the math says game's pretty much over, right? Like 30-point leads are, damn near impossible for anybody to come back from. Apparently the team thought that also, because they gave back the vast majority of that lead in the second half. The best way I could describe it is they started fucking around. And while they were started fucking around, San Diego did not fuck around. And San Diego just kept clawing back until finally in the last, I don't know, what do you think, 5-6 minutes, right? They put on kind of a full court press and really, really, really disrupted WSU's ability to even get the ball up the floor. Nate Calmese found himself on the bench for, whatever reason we can speculate. Parker Garrett's was taking up those minutes, and Parker Garrett's for, whatever reasons people like him as a player. One thing he's not good at is taking care of the ball. He's got the highest turnover rate on the team, turned it over a whole bunch at the end. USD kept coming back, but eventually put him to bed. And the funny thing is, it never got closer than 7. It was never closer than 3 possessions, right? I got that right, yeah?
No, I think it got down to like 5.
Did it get to 5?
5, yeah. Well, because Rasmussen hit the shot right as time expired to make it 7. But there was one possession where San Diego took a 3, and if they hit it, it was either going to get down to 2 or 3. And I remember seeing the shot up, thinking, "Oh my God, this is going to." And then they missed. I think at that point they missed, and it's like, okay, I think they should be okay now. Like got the went shot free throws.
Yeah.
But it's
well, like that. That's kind of my point, though. Like they kind of had to make almost every shot to overcome it. They didn't. That's why 20-point lead, 30-point lead. Like that's why those are great, because it's pretty tough for the other team to overcome it. But of course, that's not ever what you want to see from your team. So I guess let's talk about that game just real quick. Like obviously you were in attendance. Kind of how were you feeling as you were watching that? I mean, I just remember I almost got to a point where I was kind of hoping they'd blow it all the way just for the epic nature of, which of course is a totally awful thing as a fan to think or say. But also, like, I was just so, honestly, I was like kind of disgusted by the attitude with which they were approaching the second half. I'm like, this team has no reason to be this arrogant, and yet kind of there they were. So I don't know. What were your impressions of that whole debacle?
I think you said it kind of when we started talking about this. The first half was the season from tip-off to the San Francisco game, the first San Francisco game. The second half was the Pacific game since. Yep. It was, we saw what they're capable of when they're playing well. That was the first half. San Diego's awful. Don't get me wrong. If you take a 30-point lead in the first half, you're doing something right. And it wasn't just
totally.
They were defending well. They were boxing it well. They didn't really turn it over. Yeah, it helps you hit your shots, and it helps if San Diego's bad. But the first half was like, this is what this team can do. Things were flowing naturally. I mean, they were getting everyone in the game. I mean, you look at the first half box. Dane didn't miss. He had 15. Isaiah had 10. But every guy who played in the first half besides Case had scored. Then, they did have 10 turnovers, so I will retract that. They still turned it over way too often in the first half, but they had 53 points. And on the other side, in the first half, San Diego actually still rebounded, still had 7 offensive rebounds, which is too many, but 1 of 10 from 3. They were 11 of 36 from the field. They had turned them over 7 times. That's what Washington State should be doing to San Diego. And then the second half, and I think what really made it worse is it wasn't even from the start of the second half. It was with 13 minutes left They led
Yes.
that game by 30, 13-26.
Yes.
They led
Yep.
that game by 30. And within about 13 minutes, were outscored by 25 points. And I think there's
Yep.
two things to put into perspective there. First off, you basically, so the score, it was 68-38. And San Diego got it down to 5 with 40 seconds left. So that's about 13 minutes. And San Diego in that span had scored 45 points. And the issue is, part of the issue, Wazoo had scored 19. So basically, I think my math's right there, roughly that. So 19 points in 13 minutes is not very many. 45 points in 30 minutes or 13 minutes is ridiculous.
Yep.
To
Yeah.
a team that bad.
You know what? I'm not even going to let you say that. Like
To
anyone,
And of the
not
San
even a
Diego
team that bad,
level.
anyone.
Like, the only teams who can score like that are basically like Alabama. And that's mostly because Alabama averages 75 possessions a game. Yeah, they could probably score
Yeah.
45 in 13 minutes. But,
Right.
like, not San Diego. And
No.
it was, I think, you walk out of that game and you're just like, what? Like, they won. That's good. But, I mean, if that game's 2-3 minutes longer, they probably don't. And we're probably looking at a loss to, they were probably looking at a team who would somehow manage to outdo themselves from that Pacific loss at home. I mean, they have 16 offensive rebounds to a team that they should have destroyed on the glass. They turned it over 23 times. I think 7 in the final 2 to 3 minutes. It's to lose a lead that big, you have to stop playing defense and just turn the ball over and then foul. And they did all
you have
those
to have
things.
you have to have 0 point, like, turnovers mean
and
no
never-
shot gets up, no chance of an offensive rebound, whatever.
It never got closer than 5, but San Diego had a shot with 20 seconds left where if they'd hit a 3, it would have gotten down to 2.
Yep.
And then Wazoo would have had made free throws, which you never know. So, you think you walk out of that game and, and the questions toward Riley, kind of reflected this of just like, you won, but
You can't be
35
happy, right?
in the final 10 minutes of the game, like what just happened? And and I think Riley, I think he was in a tough spot. On one hand, they won. That's good. Winning is good. On the other hand, they played like absolute dog water in the second half. And every issue that we've seen for weeks was in the second half. The third hand is, it's senior night. You don't want to, drag down the team. You got Dana and Ethan, who were kind of two core pieces, from not, this year, but even when he first started as a coach. You don't want to sit there and say, it was these guys' senior nights. Ethan's parents were there, in the actual press room. You don't want to just say, there's nothing to be happy about, etc. So it's that balance. And most coaches won't do that. I mean, I remember the Winthrop game 2-3 years ago now, where the year that Kyle's team couldn't hold a lead to save their lives. The Ty Roberts, Mike Flowers year, where they blew Eastern and whoever. And we first saw signs of that with Winthrop. They were up 24 and won by 6. Mostly because Winthrop, I think, hit 16 threes in that game. In fact, Patrick Good hit 11. And, Kyle fielded the questions after the game. And it was a lot of, we got to defend better. Like, obviously wasn't happy. And then he got to, like, the third or fourth question about, like, the way the game ended. And he was like, guys, we won the game. And he was laughing as he said it. And it was the most Kyle Smith thing ever. And I think that's what Riley was trying to find of, like, yes, like, we played like dog water. We did still win. Like, it's not good enough, and there's a lot of teams in that situation we don't win against, but he's like, we did win the game, but also, we've got to play. So I think he was, and he just doesn't, he's not an emotional, like, impressors. He's not an emotional coach. He's not going to be the guy. One of the things that I think is great about Cammie Etheridge is Cammie does not care. Cammie will go on and she says what she feels and what she thinks. Because that same day, the women beat Pepperdine, I think, by 8. They didn't play very well. They didn't score. And Cammie gets on the radio show and for 2 minutes just talks about how bad the offense is. But that's what Cammie does.
Yeah.
And Cammie has earned, I think, some of that that privilege to talk that way. When you make 3 straight tournaments. If a player hears David Riley go up and say, yeah, well, we played terrible in the second half. We didn't deserve to win this and that. it's like, okay, well, you haven't necessarily won something yet. This is your first year here. We're kind of trusting you. So I think there's certainly a difference in that. And Cammy's become iconic for just the post-game victory complaints and not being satisfied. And I think it's what makes you great. But, Cammy's also a very unique personality in that way. And that, she will go out and she doesn't want her players getting praised publicly because she doesn't want them getting big heads. She wants to keep it all very tight and just, there's always something we can get better at. So, I don't think that that Riley walked into the locker was like, yeah, good one, guys. Yeah, we're good. Nothing to work on. Like, I think he probably said, hey, congrats to our seniors. Good job getting the win. That's not going to work. That's not good enough. And I think you saw maybe some signs of it against Pepperdine because they did play better against Pepperdine.
Yeah. Like, I agree. Like, that was the encouraging part to me. So, after that game, I was like, man, I'm prepared for pain against Pepperdine. I'm like, barely beat Pepperdine up in Pullman. And not that that's necessarily indicative of anything here or there, but it was just sort of like, okay, they've got this game again where they show, we talked about early in the year, they showed what they were capable of, and then they fell apart, kind of a microcosm in that game. And then they go to Pepperdine, and I'll be honest, I thought that was a really, just overall, a really positive performance. Now,
yeah,
if you just look at the final score, you look at whatever, like, I get that, it's not super impressive to go beat, a team in the 200s down there. But look, we've been regularly playing like a team in the 200s. So, and in that game, honestly, we were more or less in control, from start to finish. I think, we never sort of like, ran away from them, but also we more or less kept them at arm's length the whole time. The defense was, at the very least, there were stretches where it wasn't effective. I think beginning of the second half, they struggled a little bit, but also like the effort was there, and we haven't been able to say that at every game this year. We couldn't even say in the second half against San Diego. So, the effort was clearly there. And I just remember thinking as I was watching the game, I was just sort of like, God, where has this been? And it's not like it's been, again, they were super dominant from start to finish, but they did a lot of things really well. One of the things they did, I think, better that was like really encouraging to me, the Pepperdine's leading scorer, and now I'm like totally drawing a blank on his name. There we go. Yep. They did a great job on him, like a really good job. And he tore them up in Pullman.
Oh yeah.
And
he's a good player.
He is a really good player.
Mm-hmm.
And, like the way that they defended him, they induced him into a lot of really tough sort of mid-range shots. And he was just uncomfortable the whole game. Now they ended up giving up some to Butka that maybe, which by the way, that dude not the most Butka looking Butka that you've ever seen in your life?
Yep.
I'm just gonna throw that out there.
He looks like he looks like Andre a little bit. He's got a little resemblance to Andre Akamovsky.
He looks like he walked like straight out of like Rocky IV or something. Like he's like the son, the son of I think you know what I'm saying. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Anyway, they really, I thought it was a positive step. I mean, if the season was, 5 games longer or something, I might be like, okay, we can build on this. But at the same time, it's like, the season's not 5 games longer.
No.
Well, I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it is. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like it's going to be 5 games longer. But still, I thought it was positive. I thought it was positive.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Todorovic goes 4 for 14. Like, that's and I pointed this out in the article I wrote too. Like, Pepperdine shot 42% from the field. Like, he got to the foul line a lot, which, some of it, yes, was bad defense. Some of it was officials aren't very good at their job, and Pepperdine probably did deserve 21 more free throw attempts than Washington State. But, they did the offensive rebounds were an issue that has got to get cleaned up, and I think that's more of a personnel thing than anything. I think that's going to be something that when they go into the offseason, Riley's going to have to say, hey, we can get one Ethan Price Day and Eric Strip, but we need another, like, just, a Ruben Shinyelu type that just okay, he's going to average 6 points a game, but he's going to average 8 rebounds.
Yeah.
Something like that. And I think ND's fine as a reserve of that, but I don't think you can start putting ND in for 30 minutes to do that. It's just not his...
He played 12 minutes and had 0 defensive rebounds.
Yeah, that's not great.
He quite frankly is a terrible defensive rebounder. I don't know how. I don't know why. I mean, he's big, he's strong, he should be able to not just like get a bunch of defensive rebounds, but get defensive rebounds like what they call like out of zone rebounds, right? Where it's like, not the ones that just come right to you that you're able to go get because you're 6'9" and you got a 7-foot wingspan and you can jump out of the gym like he can. But he just, for whatever reason, is a really, really, really poor defensive rebounder. He's like, I think his defensive rebounding percentage on the season is like 12 or something, which is
11.5. That's basically the same as Isaiah Watts.
Yeah, I was going to say that's basically like a guard.
6 inches smaller and 60 pounds heavier. Which is funny because
that's
he's
a guard's number.
Offensive rebounder.
Yeah, that's the other part that's crazy. Honestly, I think most of it has to do. I mean, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but I think most of it has to do with him. Like on offense, he's posting up, he's near the basket.
Yeah.
On defense, he's, other teams have sort of figured out to drag him away from the bucket to make sure that he can't block shots. And so for the most part, he's not really in position and he just doesn't box out very well, I think. But regardless, the point you're making is we are sort of full of bigs who aren't great defensive rebounders. I mean, you look at this game, Dane Erickstrup had a really good defensive rebounding game. He had 9, but, Ethan Price played 30 minutes and he had 3. We just said, Okafor plays 12 minutes and has 0. Those kinds of things are like, it's tough to get that little production. I think Lawan played 32 minutes. He had 5, which is okay. But you'd want him to be more like 7 or 8 probably. Right. Is what you'd maybe be hoping to get out of him. So, I think you're right. I think it's a personnel issue for sure.
Your leading defensive rebounder is 6'6". I mean, your leading defensive rebounder last year was Ruben, who was 6'11", and then IJ, who's 6'9". I mean, your big guy, and it's not like that came as like, what the heck? These guys, suddenly, this is Ethan Price the last 3 years, 15% defensive rebound. Like, that's just what his defensive rebounding is. Dane's is the same exact number as it was his first year at Eastern, a little higher than last year. Lawan's is actually down a little bit from last year. Probably, I think, because they've gotten less soft. Like Isaiah's not a bad rebounder for a guard from a defensive rebounding point, like 11%.
He's a pretty good rebounder for a guard. Yeah.
Rasterson, I think, is actually, again, for a guy who doesn't play a ton and is often on the perimeter, 11% is solid. And then, you get into Calme's 8%, which, okay, fine. That's basically what Miles' was last year. Like, Miles was 9%. And they got a lot more stops last year. Granted, they got a lot more rebounds, but I think you need Okafor can be, again, like an off the bench type of, and because there is a value in him. He was huge on Saturday. I think that's the other thing that was inspiring is, Lawan was effective, but it wasn't in the scoring. I mean, 8 points, 9 rebounds, 5 rebounds, 9 assists. Like, that's a really good day, especially
and only 3 turnovers.
Yeah, which for Lawan is great. But like Isaiah, and Isaiah actually, again, had a really effective day. Yes, he was 2 of 7. He only had 7 points, but 5 assists, 1 turnover for
Isaiah.
1 turnover. Great. 3 steals. Nate was good in the second half, but again, 1 turnover, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 10 points. But what the difference is then you look down your bench and, all right, Parker Garrett hits 2 threes. You get the quality minutes that Thrasterson's giving you seemingly every night. And then Favors and Okafor do exactly what you brought them in to do. Favors goes and takes 4 threes and hits all of them. Okafor takes
pretty good
shots within 2 feet of the basket and makes 5. Like, that's what they're here to do.
Yes.
And I think you look back at it over a lot of the season. It's another domino of the Cedric Howard injury is you haven't had the bench. I mean, I think I can't remember if we talked about this yet, but I think back to that first Gonzaga game. And for 20 minutes, you played them tight because it was mostly 5-on-5. And then suddenly Gonzaga brings 2 former top 100 recruits off the bench.
Right.
Often Stromer. And, you're bringing off, Parker Garrett and Case Wynot, who are not former top 100 recruits. And that's where the difference is. I mean, you look at the Gonzaga, the first half in Pullman, I mean, Ike and Nemhard were on the bench for most of it with foul trouble or whatnot, and it was Huff and Stromer that killed them. And these are like, and granted, I think, I mean, Stromer's a good role player. Like, I think Huff could be the player of the year next year. I think except as I learned the other day, Ike still has another year somehow, even though he's 60. But I think that's where you saw so much of the difference. And if their bench can be more productive like that, okay, then it's like, well, maybe there's something there because, the guys we just talked about, and Case didn't even play that game, like, Rasmussen gives you good defensive minutes when he's out there for the most part. He's a good shot blocker. As we just said, he's a solid rebounder. You get the hustle out of those guys, out of Why Not, out of Parker, to some degree out of ND. It's just been a matter of they can't match, the quote, the base talent of the starters you've had, which has made it tough to make the changes, and to shift things around. But no, I do think, that Pepperdine game was maybe a game they needed 3-4 weeks ago. Maybe the type of game you could really build on and say, okay, this was a pretty complete performance. Like, this was, and again, we're talking about beating a not good team. And it was a 7-point win, but it was, as you mentioned, it wasn't like, okay, they had to, they beat San Diego by 4 on the road, and they had to claw just to escape that game. Like, in the second half, the closest it got was 6. And then they strung together 3 stops in a row because their offense went to sleep. And then finally re-hit a couple threes, and they kind of pulled away. So I think there was something positive. And, even on the stretch, Pepperdine made, the last-minute push because they missed free throws. But it never got to where it was, oh, my God, they might actually – you didn't really feel like they're in super danger. Because even, the Lawan, they were up 7, the Lawan misses the front end, but it's 25 seconds less. Even if Pepperdine scores that, there's 15, 20 seconds, you're still up 4 or 5. Lo and behold, someone would hit free throws.
Right. Yeah. I think that's like the game in a nutshell, I think kind of shows maybe what the potential is here as we head into the WCC tournament. Mm-hmm. Also, the limitations were sort of on full display. Right. And I honestly, I truly think 2 things. I think if they can, I think this game showed just how tough they are when they limit turnovers. And really just they had their turnover percentage in the game is 12% or something, which is one of their lowest marks of the season. And, lo and behold, you put up, 90 points and 70 whatever possessions and, 1.22 points per possession. That's fantastic. Right. And granted, Pepperdine's not good or whatever, but also at the same time, when you don't just, have a bunch of possessions with 0 points and you don't compromise your defense with live ball turnovers, the offense is still very, very, very good. Yeah. And, the reality is, they don't defend well enough to not have to have a really good offensive performance to beat teams like that. But if they can not turn the ball over and they can have just at least some semblance of organization on defense, which is what we saw in the first half against San Diego and pretty much all game against Pepperdine. Although again, that first, 10 minutes or so of the second half, a little shaky, but at the same time, I felt like Pepperdine made some nice adjustments to kind of get some guys some shot. Bethea, starts hitting threes as we're taking away, Todorovic's, shots and things like that, daring, somebody else to beat us. Right. So the guy hit some shots. Great. But it felt like they had a good plan. It felt like they were playing hard. It felt like they were playing for each other, which is something we've kind of talked about. Like it felt like they were together. And if they can simply do that, what we're looking at is, in the last 2 games, 3 halves of good to very good defense, or at least above average to very good defense.
Serviceable even. Yeah. Serviceable. And they score enough to where it doesn't have to be Kyle Smith's unbearable defense.
Exactly. And so when they're not turning the ball over, they're going to score enough. And so when I think about heading into this, tournament, okay, so they will play the winner of, as the 6th seed, they'll play the winner of the LMU game versus either Pacific or San Diego. Take your choice on that.
We know where this is going.
Yeah. I would say, look, I know some people don't want this, voodoo on them, but I would love to see Pacific for a third time. I think we are, look, like you can't have watched those two games and think that we were not the better team. Like, I think that, we lost the games. And I mean, that shit happens sometimes. And both games were both bad, but also a bit unlucky. Right. So, if that happens,
the first game, even, we just kind of build on that. The first game, Lamar Washington is a game he'll never have again. You didn't have Isaiah in that game. Second game, Nate took 7 shots. That should tell you where you need to know about Nate Calmese's health in that game. Is that he only took, that was the week where they got destroyed by the
flu shit. Yeah.
Like we said before, if they play Pacific again, they either lose a third time or they win by 30s.
Yeah. And even if they don't play Pacific, maybe they play LMU, a team they've already beaten, a team they've already shown. If they play, they don't have to play like their best game, to win that. And then if you win, you go on and face San Francisco, which is a team that you already beat once. Granted, you got run off the floor in their gym. But I would venture to say that we are, like, I don't know that I feel pretty confident saying we're not the team that beat San Francisco in our gym, but also we're not the team that lost by, 50 or whatever in their gym, or it wasn't 50, but it felt like 50, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're not that team either at this point anymore. And I do think we match up favorably with San Francisco. And so all of a sudden, maybe, I don't know, a couple wins on the table. Now, again, at that point you run into Gonzaga, so whatever. That's probably a disaster.
27 straight appearances in the WCC final.
Yeah, which is wild.
And granted,
it definitely helps to advance all the way to the semis.
Well, sure,
all the time.
They just stumble. No, they never miss the championship. But you mentioned San Francisco, and the other thing, just kind of to mention within the context of the home versus road games, they are human on the road. Like, they will lose road games. They don't lose at home. Like, the last time they lost to someone,
they beat St. Mary's.
St. Mary's and Gonzaga are the only teams they've lost to at home since 2023. So, and that was, they lost to Santa Clara, they lost to San Diego. Like, they don't lose many home games. Like, it was rare to see Gonzaga do to them in San Francisco what Gonzaga did, and I think.
But that game wasn't at home, though. That's the other thing. That game was not in their gym.
That's true. That was at
the Chase Center
Arena. Yeah,
right. So rather than playing in their little high school gym, which again, no shade, but that's kind of that's what these are in the West Coast Conference. But it's a huge home court advantage for them in that place. They decided to take some money, go to the Chase Center, fill it up against Gonzaga, and of course that didn't go great. So I don't know.
On KenPom, that's listed as a true home game, but they play Memphis at the Chase Center, and it's listed as a semi-home game.
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably miscategorized.
But yeah, they're a good team.
Do you feel similar to I do that, if we did get to face San Francisco again, that, we'd certainly have, I think, better than a puncher's chance in that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, they had the token guy goes for the best game of his career with Wang, who who's topped out at 7 points in the last few games. I think they found an answer for Malik Thomas in that second half of the game they played in Pullman.
Yep, they played really well.
He's very good. Don't get me wrong, but he isn't as super. I mean, when they played him, he was on an absolute bender. He had just gone for 34 against Santa Clara. He had just dropped 35 against Loyola. He's a little more human than he was now. And it's like, they've got one real big guy, and it's Lingard. And he's solid. He's a guy that, can get hot from three. He's only a 28% shooter, but you do have to guard him out there. But it's not the worst matchup in the world. I do think, I think it's better than having to face Santa Clara in that game.
Oh, yeah. I'd much rather see San Francisco again than Santa Clara.
And then
I never want to see that team ever again.
Well, the good news is you're not going to have to, because they all graduate.
Yeah. Thank God.
I think the only guy, I'm looking at they've got, I guess Tilly can come back 1 year. He's got another year.
Yeah.
And then, Napper and Emsinger, but O'Neal, Bryan, Stewart, Tongue, Ball are all gone.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Well, honestly, I'm a little befuddled as to how Herb Sendek put together a good offense that wasn't built around James Harden.
You don't say. Well,
I haven't figured that out
he had
yet.
the
I'm
fifth
like,
highest
good
minutes
God.
continuity in college basketball.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
In the same.
So I don't,
yeah.
I don't know. Here, just kind of put a bow on the tournament. Bart Torvik, our friend Bart Torvik out of Bart Torvik. He's not really our friend, but Bart Torvik out of BartTorvik.com has the WCC tourney simulator up. So see if these numbers sound about right to you. So he's got us at about 66% to make it to the quarters. So that would be like 66%, to win our game in the quarters. I mean,
so beating LMU,
which sounds, because we're already like, oh no, make it to the quarters. That's right. Sorry, I got it mixed up in my head.
Yeah.
To make it to the quarters. So, whether they face Loyola Marymount or somebody else, 66% to advance. That seems a little high to me, but whatever. Probably takes into account the fact that you could be facing Pacific or San Diego instead of Loyola Marymount,
and they would have played 24 hours earlier.
Yeah, there's that too. And then gives us about a 21% chance after that to make it to the semis, which, I don't know. Does that seem about right to you? Like, that sounds about right to me. It's like a, 1 in 5 shot against San Francisco. And, I mean, I don't know. Probably not. That's probably not ridiculous. It drops off super fast after that. About a 2.2% chance
then
to make it to the finals, and then a 0.4% chance to win the championship. So if you're wondering what our odds are to make it back to the NCAA tournament, it is less than 0.5%, according to BartTorvik.com. I don't know. It's not, honestly, I can't argue with any of those numbers.
Yeah. I mean, the fact of the matter is, look, I think you can make a good argument that they can win their first game. I think you can make an argument that they can beat San Francisco. Yep. I don't know if there's an argument that they can beat Gonzaga.
No,
and part of that is, I know what Gonzaga is a lot better than their record. I mean, they're like elite in every metric, and also they're old as all hell. I just said Santa Clara had 5th most minutes continuity. Gonzaga is 4th.
And they're playing their best ball right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
they
like Mark Few has them.
Yeah.
They definitely had a rough patch. They're rolling right now. That final between them and St. Mary's is going to be fucking epic.
Yeah. They had the stretch where they lose to Oregon State and Santa Clara, and it's like, okay, this is the year that they're just not. And then, since then they've lost twice to St. Mary's, and then that's it. And they, they blew out San Francisco twice. They blew out Wazoo. They annihilated Oregon State. They beat Pepperdine by 50. They crushed Santa Clara in the rematch. Like, they're hot. Before we move on, the fun fact of the day via Bart Torvik, we talk a lot about the Cedric Coward effect.
Yep.
According to Bart Torvik's, his wins above replacement stat is what you could call it.
Yep. Basically.
Cedric Coward is 20th in the country. So according to this, he is essentially more or less saying that that's the player that they lost. And I think that drives home this isn't all. They had a couple tough injuries. Like literally they lost a guy who, according to that, like that's the highest in the conference. Like no player, and again, we're talking a smaller than all hell sample size, but based off that no player in the conference had contributed more to their team than said. Dylan Darling is 14th and Oscar Clough is 24th. Dylan Darling,
having a hell of a year out of Idaho State.
And Tyson Degenhart is 15th. But, anyways, but I think that's an interesting, an interesting, way to kind of put into perspective. Like this is a lot different of a season with Cowards.
Yes, for sure. Yep. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
All right, let's pivot to the women.
Yeah.
Who have a much easier path. Actually, before we do that, let's talk beer real quick. All right, so Jamey, what are you drinking? Not beer, I don't think.
Sure have.
Oh, we have beer. We do have beer. Oh, we got another red. Is that another red chair?
Another red chair. Yep.
Attaboy. Love that beer.
Little red chair NWPA.
Good job. I've got a Stemma Brewing coffee oatmeal stout right there on your screen for the folks on YouTube. Brewed with Mirror Coffee Roasters. Stemma Brewing in Bellingham. It is okay. It's okay. I will say, so for a coffee oatmeal stout, I am just not getting enough coffee here. But that may be just a personal preference because I am an avid coffee drinker. I drink lots of coffee. I drink lots of black coffee. Like I don't even mess around with any other kind of, I don't even put cream or anything in it or sugar, just black coffee. So I definitely love my coffee flavor, maybe in a way that some people do not. So for me, the coffee is just not quite strong enough. But it's fine. It's fine. So
Fair
not
enough.
too bad. All right. To the women. Their path is a lot better because they finished third, as we talked about last week. So their path involves a lot of waiting, right?
Yep.
Like they're good because of the way, again, the WCC sets up their bracket. Teams, end up waiting around if they are in, especially in those top four. So the women could play San Diego, they could play Pepperdine, they could play Pacific, or they could play St. Mary's. Who knows?
The
Could
good
be
news
anybody,
is
and they
they're
don't play
8-0
till
against-
Sunday. So
the good news is they're 8-0 against those teams, and there wasn't really a scare in there. I mean,
yeah,
as we've talked about, there is a very clear top two in the conference. Gonzaga and Portland
Yes.
are the top two. And
Yep.
then there's kind of, I think the next team is Wazoo, and then it goes to it's like Gonzaga and Portland are here. Here's Wazoo. Here's Oregon State, San Francisco, and then here's every and Pacific's not awful, and then here's everyone else. And they did a great job this year of, okay, here are the bad teams. All right, we're gonna beat them over and over and over and over and over.
Yep.
I think they're 16-2 in quad 4 games. Yeah.
which by the way, if the men had just done that,
now I have
Right?
to look. What are the men in
like
quad?
how different are we feeling if the men had just, I don't know, let's just say throw out something like beat Pacific twice, and they're 10-8 in conference, right? And they're sitting on 19 wins or whatever, 18, whatever it is.
They're
Things
12
feel
and-
different.
they're
So
12
anyway,
and quad 4.
so to the point.
Guess who the two are?
Yeah. To the point.
Yeah.
They beat the shit out of the bad teams.
Yeah, exactly. The difference is the women have 0 quad 1 or 2 victories, and are only 2-5 against quad 3. But I digress. No, I mean they lost to Santa Clara early on, and then we've talked about the whistle fest against LMU. But then other than that, it's they lost to Gonzaga and Portland 4 times. The difference is they took Gonzaga to overtime. They gave Portland all they could handle at Portland, and Portland is again you have to take into account that they've won the last 2 conference tournaments, but they have looked very, very human lately. I mean, they needed overtime to beat Pacific. They needed overtime to beat Pepperdine. They barely beat San Diego, who is just as bad in women's as they are in men's. They barely beat San Francisco, who again is solid. They almost every one of their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of their last 8 wins. They have one win of 16 points against San Diego at home, who, as we mentioned, was terrible. And then it's 2 points in overtime, 2 points, 5 points, 7 points, 1 point, 6 points in overtime. They are surviving teams right now.
Yeah.
And, the experience factor
And
does
not
matter.
good teams either. That's the other thing. I think that's kind of the larger
Besides,
point you're making there.
that's the only team they played that was, decent there is the Cougs. They didn't, that stretch doesn't include Gonzaga. One San Francisco game, and then there's just not anyone else that's very good. But the key is that they're old. They've got, the same three of their 5 starters have been the same now for years. They've got a senior trans. I mean, they're a really old team, which is great for the Cougars next year because literally Portland is going to graduate, I think 6, if not, they're going to graduate their entire starting lineup. Which, and Gonzaga is about to graduate most of their starting lineup. So that's the other fun thing to look at in the future is, oh, wow, these teams are about to get gutted by graduations. I mean, Gonzaga is going to graduate 4 players. 4 starters, or 3.5 starters. Portland's going to graduate 5. Wazoo graduates 1. One very good one. One first-team all-conference one. But I think this is... But no, it's a simple calculus of how you get there. Assume you take care of business on Sunday against whichever of those 4 teams, and then it's, here are the best 2 teams in the conference. Here are the teams that for the last 3 to 4 years have run the conference. You want to make the tournament? Beat them.
Yeah.
The good news about that is we just mentioned Portland's won the last 2. Jamey Etheridge knows a thing or two about winning this time of year.
Yep, there's no doubt about that. And
I think that's huge.
We made a big deal about the men's basketball team. I wrote like a big long newsletter at one point about essentially how the team got worse as the year went on. Made a big deal about the trend line on the game scores, right? We talk about how you can, basically just assign a number to every individual performance, looking at, all right, adjusted offense, adjusted defense for that, just that one game. And then you can give it a number, right? Portland's game score trend line looks a lot like our men's team's trend line. Now, it started higher, right? Because, because Portland, on the women's side is better team. But also at the same time, like it sort of gets to what you were saying, which is like they're winning, but they're not winning in any impressive way. In their last 8 games, last 8 games, they've only got one game score of above 70, which to be ranked, to be at 70-ish is like to be ranked, I don't know, about 100, maybe 110, 120, something like that. And it really has started to sort of drag down their overall ranking. They're currently like number 94. They were up to like 67, 68, 65 when they beat St. Mary's. And that was a game score of 83. And then they followed up with game scores of 22, 17, 38, 86. Guess who that was against? Against us.
Yeah, of course.
But 61, 31, 69, 67. Like they're not putting up super impressive performances, which now maybe, and what, like coaches would tell you, oh yes, well, they just know how to win. Okay. Maybe, I don't know. But from an analytics standpoint, you go, well, that's indicative of a team that you don't want to say like lucky, because that just sounds very pejorative, right? Like you don't want to be like, well, they're just getting lucky. Like obviously there's something, I think you'd be silly. Yeah. I think you'd be silly to say there's like nothing there in terms of, sort of composure and all the things we associate with being able to perform when the game's on the line. Right.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, we do know statistically, you play close games, you fuck around, you're going to find out at some point. And, they've been fucking around a lot. Now I can't say they've been like screwing around or anything, but I am saying like they've been playing close games. And when you play enough close games, eventually you're going to get burned. And, they are sort of ripe for that, I think, in the WCC tournament. And hopefully that happens. Hopefully that happens against us. Hopefully that's where it goes. And I think, you made, I think, a great point with Jamey Etheridge. Jamey Etheridge is just a fucking great coach, man. We know this.
Her teams get better.
You're going to play
every year, with the exception really of last year, because her superstar tore ACL.
Right.
And still got into the postseason and went to the Final Four of the WBIG.
Yep.
Like, they still technically got better at the end of the year. It was just, hey, here's the best player in your program's history. You don't have her anymore.
Right.
Adjust.
Figure out how to play. Right.
But you make, I think Cougs fans should know very well, you play with fire, you're going to get burned. May I direct you to the 2024 football season when you win by 5 on a last-second play and by 2 in overtime, and you have to survive Fresno State and San Diego State.
Yep.
And then suddenly, luck runs out, and then you lose 3 games. And then, on the same token, there's an art to doing that. Look at this season before. Look at 2023. Talking about the football team. How many games did they lose by 3 points, by 2 points? I mean, they lost a ton of close games. We talked about we talked a little about the Mike Flowers, Ty Roberts team earlier. That was a team that how many last-second shots, how many buzzer beaters, how many things just didn't go their way for so long. And then you look at last year, and how good was that team at winning close? I mean, how many games? You look at the USC game at home, where they played like garbage for 33 minutes.
Yep.
And then it's like, yeah, they were down 9 points with 10 minutes left. And we're just like, okay, we're going to go win this game against Drake. I mean, my goodness, you talk about the tournament. They were down 8 with 6.5 to go. And then in the final 6.5 minutes, outscored Drake 20-7 because that's what they did last year.
Yep.
And like, this team doesn't, I mean, this team wins close, this men's team, but it's only because they have a 25-point lead go to 4.
Yep.
Not because they have to make a comeback, but I think there is an art to that, it's to Portland's credit, but, I also think it's different. The last couple of years, especially the last year or two as BYU kind of went down, like, you basically just, the semifinal game didn't really matter. Just, you played Gonzaga in the final. Like, this is going to be one of the bigger tests they've had in the semifinals in a while. And that's not a knock necessarily on a team from the past, but it's like, since Portland, you look at the runs they've made, obviously they had to beat Gonzaga twice in the final. But like in the semifinal last year, they beat Santa Clara, who I think ended up in the WNI. They ended up in the WBIT. And that was, look, they won 24 games, but they were solid. Wazoo still beat them in the conference or in the postseason pretty handily.
Yeah.
So I think there's a different art to what this team is capable of and what Portland's going to have to deal with. And it's just going to come down to does the experience, how much of a factor does that play? Because Portland has the edge there without question.
Yeah. But again, they're not playing their best ball.
Nope.
Maybe you catch them. And look, I mean, we came damn close to beating them twice before already. So yeah, my money's on
Once.
Once.
They got
once.
They got us pretty good, Pullman.
Okay.
Pullman
All right.
was like, that was an 18-point win. We almost got them there.
I didn't see that. All right. So, all that to say, like what we're really doing is we're kind of putting our stock in, Cammie Etheridge coming up with, a great game plan, getting her team playing great, rolling here kind of at the end of the season, which of course the school announced today, extensions for both Cammie Etheridge and David Riley. I don't think anybody would argue that Cammie totally deserves another year and like she can have give her a fucking lifetime contract. Like at this point, like she can have as many years as she wants, to be honest. David Riley, on the other hand, that generated some pretty good discussion on our premium Slack today. I don't know. My feeling on it is I just kind of don't have any particular huge feelings about it in the sense like, oh my God, how can you give him one? Like it's nothing like that. Because I think I think he obviously showed some good things at one point. Team looked super horrible for a massive stretch later. What sort of I'm struggling with, and maybe you can shed some light on this or kind of what you think. I just don't understand. I just don't understand why, in the sense, not like whether he deserves it or doesn't deserve it. I just don't understand what you get out of it by doing it. Like, to me, it's like, what does this get you? Right. So like extensions are usually like some sort of, like mutually beneficial agreement, right? Where it's like, okay, we give you another year. We either are locking you in at a little lower price, or we are giving you another year because we want to make it harder for you to take another job. And then the coach, of course, gets another year of security and maybe a raise or whatever. There's no indication here that he got a raise. There's an indication that maybe he just got another year tacked on. I'm trying to figure out what the school gets out of giving him another year that wouldn't have already been there by not doing it.
I think honestly, I do, and this is speculative on my part. I do wonder how much of it is just from the standpoint of, look, we put on paper this guy gets another year. If it's not good enough, this doesn't prohibit us from firing him. And I'm not saying that they should or that it's going to get to that point. On one hand, if he does such a poor job that he can't get to that fourth year, this doesn't say, well, now you can't fire him or anything like that. And
sure,
I know Kent buyout's been brought up and so on. I mean,
totally different deal though. He's making like a third of what Ernie was making.
The Kent contract crippled them in that way.
That was a true albatross.
Yes, and I don't think it's going to get to that point. I mean, I wrote about this earlier when I wrote about his extension. This obviously there's this lacks context, but if he wins another game, he will have the second most wins by a first-year Cougar head coach ever. behind Tony. That's it. And Tony was a quite different situation when you look kind of and now all those other coaches are coaching at the Pac-12, not WCC. But I do think there's something within that. And I think, you do look at that there were positives, that they showed some signs. They showed some not so good signs. I think, you're looking and saying, look, this is a 36-year-old coach. This is not Mike Leach, where this is his way. He's not changing. We know what this guy is. I think and hope he will look at this season, this roster, this team, and say, okay, this needs to be better. We need to make sure we emphasize more defense. We need to make sure we have more size. We need a little more veteran leadership. And I think he's very, receptive to those ideas. I don't think he's going to say, no, this is the way I'm doing it. Too bad.
Yeah.
I think the other part of it too is here's where Wazoo runs into a tough situation. You're going to roll over Cammy because obviously you're going to roll over Cammy. And there is an optics side to this. You roll over Cammy, you don't roll over Riley. And look, you can't make coaching decisions and all that on optics. We get that. But when it comes to something as really as trivial as this, is it worth it to not, that's where I kind of ask the question, is it, because, seriously, if they announced today that Cammy Etheridge's contract rolled over and not David Riley's, there would be a lot of discussion. It would not be publicity. It would, does that get to the team? We already know the team maybe doesn't have the best mental fortitude at times. Does that start to circulate? So at that point, you just wonder, is it just worth it to say, here's a rollover? This doesn't really change anything. If you don't do a good enough job, we still, this doesn't going to cripple us financially. And if you do, great. Here's another year of security. How much, seriously, you look at Cammy Etheridge staying all these years, how much does her security over and over again contribute to that? And, I know for Cammy, she loves Ann McCoy. And, I think, knock on wood, Cammy stays in the future. Ann's a big part of that.
Yeah.
But also, how much is that saying we're going to keep rolling over the contract? She had, 3 bad years until she really got going? So I do think, again, it's one of those where I get the people who are like, what are we doing here? And then I get the people, but I just don't think it's a huge deal. If they had come out and said, hey, Dave, you get a 4-year extension with more money, then be like, wait, what? It's, if they go 0-30 next year, this doesn't mean that they can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to be a lot better than that. And I do think some of that gets taken into account of, they love these rollovers. They were probably planning on doing this anyways. Was the season, with all things considered, that bad to where you said, no, we can't do this? If he goes, if we're talking about a team that finishes last in the WCC, wins 9 games, again, different conversation. I think as fans, as people who really pay attention to the team, there's an ability to dissect and analyze every little thing. You show this record of a team on the to a casual fan, they say, okay, that's fine. That's, without getting into the weeds of it and all. So I do think there's some of that comes into play of and look, let's be honest, we got spoiled the last few years of basketball.
Big time.
If Riley takes over the year after Ernie Kent, we're like, this is awesome.
True.
But
hell, even Ernie Kent's first year, because Ken Bones last year was so dreadful, we were like, hell yeah, this is great.
Yeah, it was.
It's
worst possible, especially to school like Washington State. It's the worst possible thing to be the next coach, because we got so used to the success and the style that Kyle brought. This team's a year ago at this time, and what day is it? March 4th? Let's see. Last year at this time, they had just beaten UCLA 2 days earlier to go to 23-7 and had a chance to win the conference.
Right.
We all know what happened next. But, it's, we got spoiled by that season. But it's easy to remember, that wasn't the norm. That was the exception.
Right.
Kyle, as great as he was, had his up and down years too. It so happened that he has a year and leaves, which is what happens at Washington State.
Yeah. I tend to subscribe. Just in general, when I think about things, I try to I really do think simplest explanations are the best ones. I personally, I think probably just Ann McCoy thinks he's great. Like I think that's honestly the best thing. I do think that everything you said sort of illustrates the problem with rollovers and why the 1-year rollovers I think are absolutely I just think it's terrible. I think it's a terrible way of going about contracts and contract extensions, because if you suddenly don't give one, it's taken as this massive indictment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay, so at that point you're really just, you might as well just be operating on the rollover becomes academic. And it's well, why even have the rollover then if it's academic, right? Why not just it automatically triggers every year or something, because you're basically automatically triggering it anyway. So I think ultimately what it comes down to is if, Ann McCoy is, following the Bill Moose school of contract, handling, which is, we do the rollovers. So at that point it makes sense, right? Because then truly it's just automatic. Yeah. Because if you don't do it, then people start freaking out and they start wondering, well, what the fuck? How did it happen? Why didn't you get it? Cammy got one. Why didn't he get one? Does that mean they're going to fire him? All that stuff comes with that, which is why it's I think it's an impractical way to go about handling contracts.
There's absolutely some truth to that. I don't think that's I don't think you're wrong about that. I think there is certainly some issues. I just have to point out that Arizona State just scored 100 in Tucson and lost by 13.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, remember earlier in the year when we were well, maybe Tommy Lloyd has, kind of maybe not figured this out. He lost a bunch of players. No, that Tommy Lloyd's got his shit together.
10 turnovers combined in this game.
Oh, God.
We just said Wazoo had that in a half against San Diego. 67 made field goals, 22 made threes, 57 free throws.
Good Lord.
I do like the fact that Arizona scored 113 points and only had 21 assists. And Wazoo had 26 with 90?
This is who do I want to lose more? Arizona? Bobby Hurley. Arizona? Bobby Hurley.
Hey, Bobby Hurley's kid did play and had three fouls and no other stats.
Oh, well. Good for him.
Hey, both kids played. Liam Lloyd played too.
Anyway, I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. I don't hate it. It's whatever. I think probably Ann McCoy really likes him. Mm-hmm. I do think there's a chance that the late season swoon that left all of us thinking holy shit, this is so bad, so bad, so bad. You can't, if you're the coach at Washington State, you cannot play like a 250-ish team for 2 months. You just cannot.
No, 100% agree.
I think there is. I'm not saying Ann McCoy's uninformed. I will say that there, I think, is a reasonable chance that Ann McCoy does not spend as much time on Ken Palm and Bart Torvik as we do, and maybe there's not the same feeling in the athletic department about just how bad those losses were,
and I think
the kind of stuff that made us question, okay, is this the guy? Because you can't fucking lose to Pacific twice. You can't lose, by 30 to Santa Clara twice. You can't, you just cannot do that. I do think, and again, I'm not saying McCoy's uninformed. She's wonderful. She's smart. She knows what she's doing. She's certainly no idiot. But also, I do think there's a reasonable chance that she was not looking at it through the same lens that we on this podcast are looking through it,
right.
Which again, when you're looking at the overall on balance of the season, yeah, you can understand how someone would go, hey, yeah, 18 wins, 19 wins. Yeah, I mean, that's in the context of Washington State University. It's a pretty good season. That's deserving of a rollover. If it really came down to something that simple, that would make sense to me. And not sure I can really argue with that. So
no, yeah. And look, you find an AD that says, yeah, I look at Ken Palm every day. They're lying.
Yeah, for sure. They got better things to do. My God, if they're looking at Ken Palm every day, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? You're not doing your job. You should not be looking at Ken Palm every day like me. So, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, hey, last thing here. Let's touch on spring football super quick. Spring football started. So that's great. Tell me what you saw. Tell me initial impressions. Did they let you watch any of it?
So Saturdays we get access.
Okay.
Which you said is you get full access like normal. It's today, Tuesdays and Thursdays we don't. And then after this Thursday, they're off for like 2 weeks for spring break. So we don't even, the next open practice isn't until I think the 20, no, not that far.
Yeah, so a bit of an unusual schedule, right?
Yeah,
like that's
the
not
next open
typical
practice
to
isn't until
start
the
this
22nd.
early. And
Yeah. I think what stands out to me, and I wrote about this too, is it's hard to find Jimmy Rogers on the practice field because he's just, you could always find Jake. Jake was running around. He was doing what you saw in front of the camera. Rah, big. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's the style of the coaches.
Sure.
Whereas, Rogers was just kind of, there and just observing and taking it. It reminded me a lot of how Kyle ran basketball practice, which was, I'm going to stand here with my hands tucked in my arms and Shaw's going to yell at everybody.
Yeah.
Which it was very different in that way. A lot of the standard practice things. You got the individual drills, you got the 7-on-7, you got the team periods. But it was unique. It's just there's so many different bodies, or so you're like, who are these guys? And sometimes it was hard. You look for a 52 on defense and it's not there. And it's like, okay, where the hell
for the first time in 6 years?
Yeah, exactly. But I did think that there was a lot to like, just out of the sense of there was a level of physicality that was different. I mean, they weren't in full pads, they're not going full contact, but there was a little more intensity, in the trenches. I think there was a little. I mean, there were some different things they were emphasizing. I mean, they were putting a major emphasis on ball security, of just you take the pad, boom, and you hit guys and don't fumble the ball. And at the end of practice, Rogers gas. All right, who fumbled the ball today? Okay, who dropped the pass? And I don't know what they did afterwards, but that those type of little things, just they don't fly. I mean, and I think that's, and I talked to Zebby today a little bit, and it's he just makes it clear that like there's a certain buy-in with Rogers and a certain emphasis on this is how we do things. This is not how we do things. There's no half-assing. There's no middle ground. I mean, I think I mentioned, first time I talked to him, it's, he's hard. He's a hard guy to get on. Jake was always laughing. I did get a chuckle out of Rogers about the weather. My God, first day of spring practice, it's March 1st, and it's 60 degrees and sunny. What the heck's going on? But he's intense. He cares about winning. That's all. That's what he cares about. He is going to do what it takes to win. And the one drill I loved is they get the cornerbacks doing one-on-ones with the receivers. The cornerbacks are wearing boxing gloves, so you can't grab anybody. You can't intercept the ball. Your job is to make sure you are in position, and then you can swat it away. And I thought that was a really unique take on things. It was one of those where it's going to be hard to do a full comparison at the end of the day because we're not going to see as many practices, but they looked bigger too. I mean, the phrase of getting off the bus. I wrote about this too. Like they had 10 guys put on, like on the offensive line alone, put on at least 7 or 8 pounds. Like they're bigger. And you look in the middle of the defense and you've got, Nilasoni Finau from Cal Poly at 340. Like there hasn't been a 340 pounder at Wazoo in
it's a big fella.
It's
a big fella.
Time. I think, you see some of the plays the guys are making. They really ran a stretch of one-on-ones, and every time, they throw it towards Tucker Large, the ball gets swatted, 15 feet away. So I think you certainly saw some of the impressions of, okay, there's something that's a little for real. Devin Ellison, JUCO receiver, made some really nice catches. Excuse me. I think Zebby threw the ball well, and you can tell he's in command. And I think that's the other good thing is his leadership's on display, and it's clear. Okay, this is the guy in charge. This is the guy you're going to turn to. They've got the spring injuries as per usual. You're not going to see Angel Johnson, unfortunately, until the fall. Keith Brown's a little bit banged up. I think Cale Reed will be out for the spring, but at the same time, that gives guys, a little bit of, that gives some opportunities. No Angel Johnson. That means more touches for Voorhees and Woods and Pulalasi and Schlenbaker and Joyner and Payne's actually out still from the torn ACL last year. But, I think, there's a lot more, you see a lot more 2 tight end sets when you're just kind of looking out in the field. You see just some of the speed. It looks a little bit, here's what I would say. I know there's a lot of, talk and narrative of, it's just an FCS roster. It doesn't look like an FCS roster. This is not a bunch of guys who, and as we've said before, they didn't just pluck the bottom of the South Dakota State roster. They took the guys who can play or the guys who can play in a couple of years. And I think that's the big, Trey Ridley, for example, at strong safety. Is he going to play a big role this year? Maybe not. He's probably the number 4 guy behind large Durance and Reeder. But he's a 6'2", 200-pound strong safety with 4 years of eligibility. Yeah, that guy can probably play a little bit. And I think you saw, again, just some of the size. Fernando Laclona, for example, Nick Bakken, these are South Dakota State transfers who didn't play a lot last year. Anthony Polano, but these are guys that can really, really play. And then you're going to get another kind of wave of freshmen coming in, and I would assume you're going to see them attack the portal again in the spring. I have to think they're going to want a little more experience at defensive end, probably another offensive lineman or two. So I think that there is just, but I would say this. I know I've been going on for a while now, but the size is what stood out, especially on the offensive line. I think when you look at Ashton Tripp's been 290, well suddenly he's 305. Hilborn, who has gone if you look at Hilborn's weights every year, it goes up, down, and he's like 318 now, but it's not like, I think he was 318 as a freshman. It doesn't look like that. It looks like a good 318. And then meanwhile, Chris Leno, who was 330 last year, was 297. So they say, all right, we're reshaping your body. You're going to look different. Meredith's 193 now. He's up 17 pounds, and you see it. You see there's a little more muscle on him. Shackelford last year was kind of a twig. There's a little bit of, you look at his lower half, and okay, there's some drive, there's some force, there's some size in there. So there was definitely, I think, a directive of we want to be bigger because that's part of running the ball. You got to be bigger, you got to be stronger.
Yep, no doubt. I love hearing that. I love hearing they're bigger. I love hearing that the offensive line looks the part. I love hearing that the attention to detail is there, because obviously that was sort of a pretty big knock on Jake Dickert. And I don't know that, like you were talking about the difference between, the rah-rah versus whatever.
Yeah.
I think you can be successful with either one. So I don't think, one is necessarily inherently better than the other. I will say, though, that the way you describe Rodgers is, in a lot of ways, the way that, Mike Leach made his way around a field. When he was at practice, I mean, he would just sort of kind of walk around. He would stand there. He'd fold his arms. He'd inspect. If, he saw something that was not, satisfying to him, he'd jump in and teach. Right. And it was oftentimes, I remember the one time, I didn't get to watch practices very often, since I don't live in Pullman like you do. But at the same time, the times I did get to do it, one time I got to watch, kind of real up close. And, just the way that he would teach, and the teaching was truly attention to detail. It was like the one that I got to see sort of really up close was he was working with the receivers. And he was talking with them about their releases and what they should do with their hands, during as they're hand fighting. And I mean, he's in there, showing guys, all right, you do this. And he's doing it with the hands, and it's Mike Leach. I mean, I don't know how many people kind of have ever had a chance to be close to Mike Leach, but Mike Leach is not a large man. He was I don't know, 5'10". He was not a tall, big guy, pretty small dude. So he's out here, with these receivers, some of whom are, Des Patman size or whatever. Right. And he's, showing them what to do. But it's he's in there, right? He's in there, and it's and he just the detail. He's no, do it again. Do this rep again. No, that's not quite right. Do it again. And, and then, and I got a chance to sit in on a quarterback film room thing. Same kind of deal. It was just sort of yeah, you're close, but it's got to be this. It's got to be this. It's got to be this. Like one of the things he talked about that always stuck with me was like he was talking about running backs. And, like in his offense, right? Like, right. 80% of the time, those running backs are going out into the flat. Yep. That's it, right? Like they're just like out to the flat. And he was talking about, he just kept emphasizing like that running back's got to get out there faster. That running back's he's got to get out there faster. It's not fast enough. He's got to get faster. It has to be faster. It's not fast enough. Yeah, I don't know if he can play. He's not getting out there fast enough. Like, and I was like, I don't know. He looks fast enough to me. Like, I don't know. But it was like the detail and the timing. So to kind of bring it all back around, like I kind of love hearing, the attention to detail because, without having watched, Jake Dicker practices, obviously you did. I can't, speak to what he did or did not do at practice. But I will say that his teams were such that they did not look like attention to detail was their strength. Did not look like that was a thing that was demanded out of people day after day, rep after rep, over and over and over again. And, again, different people do things differently. So that's not necessarily like, whatever, some massive indictment. But at the same time, it's like, I think at Wazoo, I think there is something to be said for, hey, like details matter, execution matters because that's where the margins are. And when you're at Washington State, like you gotta push those margins as far as you can get them. And, you mentioned Kyle Smith, same kind of deal, Dick Bennett, Tony Bennett, same kind of things. And I know we're mentioning like sort of legendary coaches. So maybe that's not right. Maybe those comparisons aren't fair, but at the same time, like there's a reason those guys are fucking legends. And it's because they do those things. They do demand those things out of those players. And if Rodgers, again, being a young coach, we sort of know how young he is, but at the same time, being brought up in a program with, coming up through the ranks under a coach, playing under a coach, coming up, coaching under a coach who, was tremendously successful, really, really good coach. And, you don't become that kind of a coach without being tremendously detail oriented. Like I just kind of love that, he's establishing that right off the top for sure.
Yeah, no, I think, again, the attention to detail is a good way to put it. And, I'll be curious to kind of see what it looks like the next time we see practice. But no, there certainly seems to be something just even slightly that it's like, okay, like they're, he's testing stuff a little different. And like I said, there's a physicality aspect that, and a size aspect that I don't know the last time we truly saw. But they're like I said, they're bigger.
I love hearing that. All right, let's wrap this up. Jamey, tell the folks where they can find your work.
They can find me at cougfan.com, talking everything you could possibly want to know, all kinds of stuff. And then for Twitter, JAMEYVINNICK, 9. Have all kinds of hoop stuff, spring ball stuff, whatever you're looking for, it's there.
Yeah. Well, it is truly everything because you are the Pullman bureau chief.
This is true. This is
by the way,
fact.
I gotta know, do you have business cards?
Not yet.
I'm thinking you should, man. You gotta get Barry on that shit. You gotta be like, man, I need some business cards that say Pullman bureau chief on them.
Right.
No, I think you should. So everybody go out, read Jamey's stuff, give Jamey a follow out there on Twitter. You can find me on Blue Sky, which is where I hang out these days, newscoog.podcastvseveryone.com. Again, subscribe to the newsletter at podcastvseveryone.com. And with that, I'm going to say, go fucking Cougs, Jamey.
Yep, stick.
And Black Lives Matter.
BLM.
And if you can't join a union, support a union, shop in union shops, and get vaccinated. All right.